Welcome to another episode of the Postmodern Polymath Podcast. This is episode 142. Joining me co-host wise is the inimitable Stud Muffin, John. How's it going, John?
Greetings. I am here on time. Yay. How's everything in your world, man?
Uh, Looking to live in my car because rents are going up so ridiculously high around here.
Yeah, that does suck.
But I'll be okay. It's just that single mothers and shit that I worry about. So and such. Whatever. My SJW ass. I can go live with my
I
mom.
mean, if you take care of your kids, then there wouldn't be so many single mothers out there, Chris.
Tony from the God chat is in the chat. And he says, "Good day, Chris and John." Even though technically he is from Britain, he told me where, and I forgot. But he lives in Australia, so I guess he can get away with that. So anyway, we have a special guest this week that I kept meaning to get on, but I get drunk and forget and shit. So yeah, let me read this thing that we that John wrote for our guest here, which is kind of funny. Wait a minute, I got to kind of use two hands for this.
You had to say that before, have you?
No, actually. And now, for your viewing and listening pleasure, wielder of the cough twig called Thunder Lumber, shorer of his ass on Facebook and other things, leader of the Sun Moon cult, and lifter of heavy things, the one, the only, thank the gods. Wait. Shit, what was your name again?
Keated.
Oh, fuck, actually.
And then you mess it up.
Oh, well. Give it a little extra.
It worked. Oh, yeah, key to darker one more time. I'm sorry.
It's too late, man. I'll have to get the podcast version. I'll have to go back and fuck with it.
Yeah.
We all know you don't do any editing.
No, I don't, actually. It's true. So we have two people watching, and that's a miracle. One guy I give money, and I'm not sure who. Oh, I know who the other one is. I think I don't know that particular name. But anyway, so we're having you on, Keeter, because you are a mind on my Facebook feed that is, I would say, sharp in kind of a philosophical. You know how to use your mind, right? You know, your brain works well. Let's just say.
Well, thank you.
Initially, what we were going to talk about was postmodernism, but then we had a kind of because the whole thing sprung up from the name of the show, and the only reason I use is postmodern because I didn't know what it means, and that's kind of a rip on people like Jordan Peterson who use this term, and neo-Marxism, postmodernism. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Should go back to podunk.
I probably should, but it's too late now. It's too late. So anyway, that was the whole joke. But then you started talking to me about this thing called Afro Pessimism, and I think that's something obviously that's going to be more relevant to you, probably closer to the heart, as it were, for you. And it seems you had mentioned it's something you've been looking into a lot lately. So can you kind of just give, first off, like kind of a quick, I know, quick as possible, I guess, little kind of, what is Afro Pessimism?
Hold on. Before you do that, Keeter, had you heard of Afro Pessimism before this, Chris?
Not as a term.
Okay. So let's do this then. And what do you think it is, just from what the title is? Yeah. What's your initial reaction? Your hot take.
That's a bit of a cheat because he told me a little bit, but I can tell you as soon as I heard it, it was like self-explanatory to me. Afro Pessimism well, shit, is black people just feeling a sense of hopelessness because it's the world they're living in is just so against them, and there's so many inequalities and I'm telling two black people this shit, So I mean, y'all know, you know, what's going on, right? So to me, that's I kind of got that general, read just by reading the word, but I mean, I don't know about the whole, the
Yeah.
guts of it, as it were, and that's why I want kind of Keeter to kind of. Do you, John? Are you familiar? I assume you're familiar with this term.
I am, but it's time for Keeter to talk now. He's been itching for this one.
Well, my real entry is probably into Afro Pessimism through Frantz Fanon, and I think I've read the majority, if not all, of his books and shit. But mostly I think about Black Skin, White Mask. That's for me, my jump off into Afro Pessimism, and as such, my general thought about Afro Pessimism is my own, and I think that's the important thing, right? That unlike some discourses, it's in a theory, whereas this is it's an existential question. What is the state of blackness in America in 2022? And we can extend that question geographically outward, right? Like, what is the state of blackness in the world? And if we're honest about that, we can, quantitatively fucking write down and make an inventory of like how fucked up shit is for us, you know. And this isn't for any reason but the prosperity of, as they say now, the global north, right? So like the colonial apparatus itself seemingly grounds the grounds Afro pessimism, That's generally how I look and think about it. A lot of it recently has been coming into my mind. And again, through Fanon, like what may sound like something that I should be on watch, right? One might say, oh, this dude is having thoughts about suicide. And it's like, no, when I think about death and my body and this place, all I can think of is that there is nothing here but death for me, you know? And that realization, that's pretty fucking pessimistic, but again, like I like to lean into Fanon because out of his notion of like killing oneself for the new humanity to arise, I think there is always hope, because a part of Afro pessimism is not just the bleak, it's not just what gives me angst, it's also our resistance, right? You know what I mean? Like I think that is an important component to the pessimism. It's not just this nihilistic ass shit of like fuck, I'm done for. It's fuck, I'm done for, and what and you know what I mean? And
Okay.
so that's lately I just been really kind of looking into notions of death, dying, and disappearing, right? One might very well argue that some of the apathy that we might see within, and I hate to use a generalization, but like young Black youth, particularly young Black men, that apathy itself may be reflective of a death fixation, right? You know what I mean? Like there's such a rich ground to start asking questions if we accept that, this is in fact the reality that's going on right now in the richest country in the fucking world, right? So what's being Black in fucking Brazil? What's being Black in Mexico? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, it's like that question not only enables the ennobling of Blackness, but all other people as well. When we see this shit in Ukraine, it's like, yeah, and even in the fucking face of war, right? You motherfuckers still got time to discriminate
Yeah.
other
Very
human
fucking.
Yeah.
beings,
That's
and
what.
so that brings into question, what are you fucking fighting about? You know what I mean? That if you still are fighting and warring, that you still got this commonality of displacing other human beings as something other than that which is human being, maybe that's what the fuck you need to be talking about, you know? But that's a whole nother story.
So is Afro pessimism a discipline or is it just kind of where did you hear about it?
Um, Late, reading for nine wasn't presented to me as pessimism as much as irony. But in reading for nine, it's like I think in Wretched of the Earth, Sartre writes a fucking intro or what have you, and so that kind of it is existential, right? It's an existential question of what is the black body in colonialism. Um, I'm sorry, what was the question again? What? Huh?
Uh, I was just curious. I had never heard that term. And I didn't know if that was just something that was.
I'm sorry. Yep, because it was a double question. Where did I hear it? Okay. Yeah. Yep. Um, that's so I didn't hear it in school. I think that's the cool thing about it as well. Is it's accessible. So I wouldn't say, yeah, maybe you can't say it's a discourse and or discipline.
You made this shit
Um,
up, Keter. You made this
yeah,
fucking
basically,
shit up.
Well, isn't everything made up
and that
in the end?
And actually,
right,
it's pretty awesome. You better fucking
and there.
go ahead and uh, trademark that shit now.
Well, I did not.
Everybody, when you are the first professor at DePaul or wherever Yale of Afro pessimism, I want to mention. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, I mean, it's that's the thing that's good about it, man. It's like it's accessible. So I remember a friend of mine, she was telling me about it. Like she had mentioned Afro pessimism, and then I did my little reading. I was like, oh, okay, Um, but that's I think is cool. Is like just in general, there's ways to track and witness and fucking behold black intellectualism and black cultural artifacts. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like John's cousin, like he writes extensively from a position of Afro pessimism. You know what I mean? And so that the thing that's cool is within black intelligentsia in the U.S. and abroad, you know, motherfuckers are talking this shit, and it's like if you have a concern, if you're black and have a concern toward what is happening around you in context to the collective of blackness, then you're automatically an Afro pessimist, you know.
Who's John's cousin?
Well, I've got a lot of them, but he's talking about Voodoo Monkey Foot at this point. My cousin Preston, he started
Yeah.
a YouTube channel recently where he's diving into. Um, I think he'd call it more Afrofuturism than Afro-pessimism, but I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him. But
Hmm.
I introduced him and Keter a while back because they have similar thoughts on things and felt they needed to get together. Uh,
Yeah.
Seems to have worked out fairly well. But
Okay.
to kind of more simplify what what Keter was saying with the Afro pessimism, like yeah, I didn't know, I didn't hear it in college or in my Black studies or anything. It was fairly recent. But Afro pessimism is essentially what uh, I was just about to say Angry Black Rant, but critical race theory. It's essentially
Mm-hmm.
critical race theory before critical race theory, because it's not just a genre. It incorporates everything, um, especially in most intellectual places, and how everything revolves around exploitation of black people. How this country and most of the modern world was built on that. It's like I said, it's essentially critical race theory before that was a term.
Is when we talk about blackness, are we talking about global blackness, or are we talking specifically about American experience, or is it kind of a either or both?
Yes.
I mean, could we be talking when we say? I mean, because obviously not every there's non-white folks who aren't black, like Native American, Native Americans, Hispanic folks, whatever the not white people who were exploited, basically, is what I mean. So when we talk about this, are we putting other people of color, as we might term them, in that for this discussion or for this idea?
I don't think so. No, this is not. That's why
No.
that should say Afro. I think, of
Okay.
course,
Okay.
from that, can other people learn? Absolutely. You know, but again, that's the thing. There's, I mean, that notion of inclusion has to be, rather the notion of Afro pessimism, including others, has to be contextualized through the colonial apparatus, right? Because nobody ass came on no fucking boats but African people, and so in that historical context, it that necessarily then prioritizes the black psyche, and that is what has to be centered. Now, if motherfuckers want to learn about that for sure, but
Okay.
there's no need for me to include the psyches of others to justify or clarify my own. This is about the black African diasporic and continental, response to colonialism, right?
Okay.
And its
That's
maintenance.
right. I just wanted to specify, make sure we had my term was correct or whatever. The way you were using it, I wanted to make sure I understood it. So yeah, you just said I just didn't even think about. I mean, Africans are the only ones that are shipped off to other fucking countries. I mean, if we think about it historically, shit. I guess you're
Yeah,
right. I never really
and
thought
in a
about it that
place
way.
at a place called Gory Island, I think off of like Senegal or something. There's a
Mm-hmm.
counting house, and on the doorway it's called like the gate of no return. You know what I'm saying? Um, I think we'd be hard pressed to find any other kind of, you know what I mean, like marker of colonialism. You know, this is the gate of no return. That is literally what has happened, right? I can't return back to Africa. You know what I mean? The loss of language, cultural identity, family and collective traditions, all of those things are lost, you know. And so the gate of no return, which begs a huge fucking question, I think, within the framework of Afro pessimism, right? Like that loss of of identity for this non-being status, you know. The codification within the United States Constitution of us being property. Who else was that? You know. Um, so I think it's important because there's often that demand, and I think that's the part of the psychosis of it all, right? There's a want for a dominant society or whiteness to have me participate in its psychosis by gaslighting me into uh, not acknowledging what it is and what it has and what it will do to me, you know? And those words are threatening, right? And then on the other hand, the threat is not just simply me as a black man saying that, but me as a black man understanding that through my existential crisis, while unique, I can still build coalitions with other people who have experienced the colonial forces of Western society. You know?
Right. But you got to get your house straight for. I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, we have to center your struggle. You have to center Africa or the African diaspora or whatever you want to call it when you're
Yeah.
talking about Afro pessimism, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
you can build coalitions, but first and foremost, we gotta figure out, we gotta center ourselves and figure out what the fuck we, y'all, whatever. I don't know how to say that without sounding like a horrible racist, but
Go ahead and say you people. You know you want to.
nope.
Nope, nope, nope. Not touching it.
But you know what I'm saying. So yeah, you gotta get yourself straight, and then you can build coalitions to kind of, uh, you don't it want this kind of what do they call it? Reductionism. To
Mm.
like one thing that everybody is like struggle, right? Well, yeah, a lot of people struggle, but you don't want to reduce it down. You want to reduce it down to more than just that layer. You have to, when you talk about struggle, you have to take into account your specific uh, being or whatever, your specific identity. So y'all's case, Black Americans, or also
Mm.
part of the African diaspora. So, yeah, when the Afro means African descent, I guess. So, what are some current examples of can you think of that just shit going on that would just kind of
I mean,
highlights?
shit. I will highlight the fuck out of this shit. Cause this, to me, this would fucking fuck me up, man. You know, uh, when them fucking, you know, bastards murdered Ahmaud Arbery, and chased that man down. That was during a fucking pandemic, you know, and America's racism caught me slipping. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, okay, shit gonna cool out for a little bit because it's a fucking pandemic. And what did we see? You know what I mean?
Just kept on
We
going.
saw these three white men fucking chase down a brother and shit and murder him in fucking daylight and shit. So I think about that shit. So how you think I see, you know, what's going on in Ukraine? You feel me? You
Yeah,
got
so
these are black, and African students contributing to the economy, right? These are Asian folks, students contributing to the economy, and not they ought to be prioritized, but that they are actively being discriminated against to fucking leave. That's Afro pessimism, right? It's the
definitely.
reality that even when there's a war going on, the last motherfuckers that they gonna privilege and prioritize white bodies.
Right.
White people gonna white people, basically. It's
Yeah,
what's gonna
I
happen,
mean, you
right?
look at fucking Fort Bliss, Texas, right? They're babies, they're kids, separated from their fucking parents in Fort Bliss, and we don't hear about that shit. And the fact that there was a fucking COVID outbreak there, you know, these are kids, right? Kids. What's happening? We see these Haitian brothers and sisters. Well, they're all over, man, on the fucking horse with a fucking whip, like it's goddamn 1735, you know, and the way in which fucking Hungary has absorbed, a lot of fucking Ukrainians. But where was they at for other folk? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, before Ukraine, the world, they're the most refugees in the world, and I think they said since World War II, right? Like
Europe,
there's
yeah.
been a refugee, right? There's been a refugee crisis, and even within that crisis, what was happening? Leaving these folks in fucking camps and shit, without proper infrastructure, for sanitation. But they just absorbed millions, and we know why. It's because they're white. You
Yeah.
feel me?
Yeah, I don't think it's
And
any
it's
sense.
like there's no getting around it. I mean, shit. Katanji Brown Jackson. You feel like, it's a fucking shame. It's like every day black people are going through that experience. You don't have to be an overly educated fucking judge to have to deal with what she had to deal with. Black people deal with that shit every fucking day. I live in Chicago. I know if I walk certain places, I go certain places, people are going to look at me and be like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" Third largest city in the country. Niggas been here for a minute, right? but motherfuckers still look at me surprised, like, why am I here? You know. So I mean, it's one of those things, man. It's like if you like I said, I just think of it and frame it as the existential crisis. You know, I enjoy it because there's a literary aspect to it. You know, there's an intellectual aspect. You get, you know, an intellectual and a cultural kind of framing of what the world is, and that's necessary for my psyche and the psyche of other people, other Black people, because we get to validate one another, right? One of the most powerful things was reading. I was in community college at Truman, you know, community college in Chicago, and I was reading. You know, a friend of mine got me "Wretched of the Earth," and I remember reading it, and that was the first time I read anything, and that validated, or I felt validated in my anger. You know, the way he talked about violence excited me, not for the sake of violence, but that violence that sometimes feels necessary when you need to stop something or someone from hurting you. And I remember reading that, you know, and so it's really important for the Black psyche to have other Black people validate what is in fact going on. You know, these motherfuckers are acting brand new, and it's like, how many songs have there been written, you know, about police violence? You know, like we have catalogs of songs going back, you know, to the early 20th century, and it took fucking cameras and videos for white America to finally be like, oh. And it's like, you know, at 43, I remember Rodney King, you know, like I remember seeing that shit, and that wasn't new then.
Yeah.
You know. And so it's important because I think, you know, we have to, and in the fact of having to brace ourselves against the future violence that we might see, whether it is the violence that we are enacting upon ourselves in our neighborhoods that we may find sometimes, or the way in which, you know, the state operates. Like I have to brace myself in thoughts of Black people I know, in the event that something happens to them, you know, I have to mentally, you know, imagine harm befalling my loved ones so that I can cope being here, you know. And I want to say that out loud because I know I'm not the only Black person that has a fear of, you know, I don't have kids, you know what I mean? But I got friends, I got family, I got cousins, I got a sister, I got a mom, and I have a fear for when they go out and if I'm not there, you know. And that's something that I know we all carry, and that psychological burden collectively should be voiced and seen, you know, because a part of that, what makes us pessimistic is that anti-Blackness is a declaration of whiteness saying I'm not a human being, right? And that long history of not being a human being is one of the impediments for apathy, or I'm sorry, empathy, right? Like there's this, you know, like there's this, you know, shit, cognitive dissonance, you know, that white folks, the dominant culture has toward Blackness because they really don't see us as fucking human beings, right? You can see that in medical books right now, right? Black people have a higher threshold for pain. The fuck? So, I mean, you know, I think if we're being honest, and like I said, that's just it. If we're being honest, the psychological apparatus for the colonizer and or whiteness and dominant culture has to also be a pressure on them, you know, whether they recognize it or not. There are pressures on them as well. And again, this is why I lean into Fanon, because that's the first motherfucker that said, you know, whether you're a colonizer or a colonized person, you're in a state of psychosis because these identities that we inherit, these social, historical, political, and economic identities we inherit are just that, inheritances. You know, we're so fucking far removed from the shit, and yet we're, you know, role playing, right? Fucking dominance and subservience, because assholes 200, 300 years ago, that's what they knew about the world, right?
Yeah.
But presently we have ideas of something other than that kind of you know, dialectic of power, right? We can think of
Dialectic.
something.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know,
What's dialectic? Sorry.
Well, just a if we're the people talking is a dialectic, right?
Okay.
That's it. We're being dialectical at the moment.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. But I am appealing to Hegel. When I say dialectic explicitly, I think often about his phenomenology, and people are very much familiar with the master slave dialectic. Um, the premise of the book is a movement. And so the movement is consistent of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So what we have with the master slave dialectic is that modality, thesis, master, slave, uh, antithesis that is not functional, and we come up with a new idea. I think, though, that the master slave dialectic is important because that's not, it's important because I think it's a great example of what the colonial system is, right? That on the one hand, the master is necessarily defined by the slave, right? You cannot separate one from the other. So the same with the colonizer colonized. You can't separate one from the other. The same with blackness and whiteness. You can't separate one from the other. You know, but we're going to have to start to find ways of how to do that. And I think we find ways how to do that by grounding further or deeper into the shared existential crisis that is humanity itself. This bare human being that even though the shit is going on in fucking, Ukraine, and I can think about myself in this black world, but I can also be sympathetic to, people who are facing war and conflict, whether it's in fucking, Ukraine or fucking Yemen, right? That no matter what hurt I feel, as long as I can keep that part of my humanity alive, that I can empathize with other people who are facing some shit, I'm think I'm gonna be all right.
So, kind of a weird, I don't know if paradox is the right word, but this idea that you
Probably.
were talking about, on the one hand, you have to concentrate on struggles that you have lived and your race or your ethnicity or whatever you want to call it have lived. But also at the same time, you have to keep in mind also that there's this higher thing where humanity as a whole needs to try to find its way out of this psychosis, as you say. And so, can those things be accomplished simultaneously, or is it like one of those things where you have to try to hit one level and get that solved, and then you can kind of go up the pyramid or whatever?
I think like with all things in reality, you know, all of us normal motherfuckers, we live in a horizontal world, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you may have a boss, da da da, but when you're around your people, when you're around your friends, when you're out in public, it's horizontal. What I've learned about living in a horizontal world is that it all is virtually actual. All can become actual really fast. So to answer your question, I think absolutely. It's just a matter that one as an individual, you know, you say stop. I mean, truly, there are things, any number of things like myself, I know I have to actively acknowledge when I'm feeling anger because that anger is pointing to the fact that I'm hurt about something. And often what I'm hurt about is this thing, you know? And so I have to learn, I've had to learn how to acknowledge that feeling and say, hey, to live, you know, and de escalate that shit, And so I think, yeah, we absolutely can, I mean, that's the beauty of being a human being. We have words like contradiction and paradox for a meaning, for a reason. We literally can hold two opposing ideas in our mind at the same time. And guess what? Our heads don't fucking explode. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
some people's do.
Well, so
Or
yeah, maybe uh
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I think listen, I went to Montessori as a little kid, so I don't wear deodorant and I wear oil, so I'm a little bit of a hippie. And so
Oh
there is an
Jesus!
idealism.
There's a
There is an
fucking
idealism.
patchouli and shit.
There's an optimism that's there. And I think it's a necessary one. You know, um, I believe that with, and I know, and particularly with how and what we're facing with misinformation and disinformation, I still believe by virtue that disinformation and misinformation are in play, I still believe that information itself is the way in which we can all start to get a little bit closer to the grander, not even grander, but closer to the world of peace that we all know we fucking want. You know, everybody want food, shelter, health, education and shit. The people that fucking, that are rattling against that are on a horizontal plane as us, the only reason they're doing that is because there are people with vested interests that have a lot of money, right? That they can, send out information and tell people otherwise. Um, I just think it's, and I'm not an organizer, but I know what organization can do, you know. I mean, like I said, the fucking largest, I didn't say it, but the largest, private employer is fucking Walmart, you know. And so you got a whole bunch of people that are working, or, we can look at Amazon, right? And we got a whole bunch of people who are working in the same place, and they may have different lives, different interests, all that stuff. But the one thing that's in common, that if the environment changed, politically, they would have more say so on what kind of money they were bringing home, you know? And so in that kind of way, I mean, like, yeah, I gotta be hopeful, because, it's just, that's it. People are more conditioned to look upward, like, oh, what, the overlord, the vertical power is gonna come help me. And it's like, well, nah, look to your left and right. Even if there is this vertical thing, it's got to get down to you. The people to your left and right, they're right there. You know what I'm saying? Like that's I'm a fool, but I'm like, that's where the power is. You know what I'm saying? It's like people power, ABCD, asset-based community development. We have a greater power once we get to look at one another and realize that you're an asset in my life. You're not a fucking competitor or a threat to me. You're an asset, because we have common goals, because we're in a common community, you know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I like Fanon because that nigga say, a new humanity. And that's all the fuck I want, you know? I want to be a part and live in a new world, And I know that's fanciful talk, But I think that's a world that is that could potentially be, you know?
Well, I'm a little more pessimistic than you are, Mister Afro Pessimist. On that score, especially when people can barely survive. You kind of my one pop psychology term, Maslow's hierarchy needs. The one fucking thing I know.
Yeah.
You get if you survive out here trying to just survive, you ain't got time to think about the hierarchy shit. Although, as you say, person to person, I guess you don't really need that part. Kind of, if you surviving together, then that in and of itself kind of creates that
Well,
that
I think
that
it's important
relationship.
to I think it's important to contextualize something or most things through this. Most things that I may say. When I was a little boy, my grandfather, James Pearson Morgan Sr., uh, would drive us around Mound in Tallulah, Louisiana. And every year he'd drive past this building, point it out, and say, "That's a plantation." And I was a little guy, so I didn't know what plantation meant. And over time, as I got older, I knew what the fuck a plantation meant. So don't mistake the optimism that I have for just the optimism that we may normally think of. Because to the contrary, that optimism is absolutely really, rooted in the historical resistance of African descended people, right? You're right. When people they don't have time to think about hierarchies, but they do have time to resist, you know, and that notion of resistance is absolutely contextualized by the people around you. Like I can resist by myself, but the greater number of people that are working together toward that, the stronger the possibility of change, right? And so
Right.
that's my hope, that's my optimism, not some, not
Pie in the
this
sky.
yeah, not this language of progressivism that is, you know, the fucking Democratic Party, right? Or intimate or incremental progress, right? Like slowly, no, fuck off, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Um, I know how shit moves, you know, and we have a strong, rich history here and abroad. We can look at our brothers and sisters and how and what were the means by which they gained greater political autonomy. So, you know, we can look at the brothers out in Staten Island at Amazon, right? As a microcosm of the United States, what the fuck is Amazon but that, right? But those two brothers, you know, those three cats, you know, they did something, you know, and what they did was violent, right? They disrupted the system, and they didn't have to punch anybody, right? I'm saying that, you know, we might do ourselves a favor if we broaden the language of what violence looks like, you know, and in context to optimism, the same thing. In context to hope, you know, my hope and my optimism comes from the fact that I know sometimes you got to lift up your hands and, you know, throw them from the shoulder, metaphorically or figuratively, to, you know, to stop some shit, you know. And I think, like, you know, we ought not be afraid of the intellectual arms that we have to throw, as well as our physical arms, because it's more of us. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's literally fucking more of us. You know, them fucking, you know, like, I mean, white poverty is made invisible, just like white criminality. You know, there's a bunch of poor ass fucking white people, and
Yeah,
and nobody, and the only people talking to them are niggas like Trump, right?
yeah.
You know, black, you know, the Democratic Party isn't approaching them, you know, so it's like, you know, there has to be that moment where, you know, action goes forth towards building coalitions, or at least presenting that shit, because, like, you know what, I know I got more in common with a poor ass white motherfucker in, like, West Virginia, Appalachia, than I know that I do in a motherfucker that's living in Chicago, that moved from fucking Iowa and living in Lincoln Park. You know what I'm saying? And we can't forget that shit, you know, like straight up, I don't give a fuck about that class fucking race. I mean, that class race question is a great intellectual thing, don't get me fucking wrong. And as I said before, I will always center my blackness, you know. But in the actual matter of you know, that's in theory, but in the actual matter of application, I know I'm not fighting for blackness, I'm fighting for fucking humanity, right?
Okay, I got you.
And yeah, you know, you got to build with niggas on that note. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, it's legit that, I mean, you know, it's like, man, the Arctic is on fire. You know, these niggas was playing war games in fucking Chernobyl. You know, like, the world is really fucked right now, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. No.
And so, like, I think niggas need to have a sense of urgency, because, you know, and, like, not in this reactionary sense, you know, but a sense of urgency and context. We can look all across the world to see the ways in which, like what went down in Sudan, right? Like, the ways in which people have been resisting. You know, we as Americans are lazy as fuck. You know, these motherfuckers got up and did a goddamn truckers fucking, and I gotta give these motherfuckers credit for that shit. Some asshole organized it and got these motherfuckers to do a truck thing. And it's like, you know, the way that we don't come up and show out for workers' rights and, like, general strikes. You see what I'm saying? It's like,
Oh, that
yeah, we
kind of
need to
shit.
do,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we gotta get tougher, you know?
It's never taken hold. Socialism just has never taken hold in this country. And I
Well,
think the capitalist class has just been really good at separating, you know, the oppressed classes.
hell yeah.
From the very beginning, you know, when they saw indentured servants making common cause with slaves, they nipped that bud right quick as soon as they saw that shit starting. You know, by giving
Mm-hmm.
the wages of whiteness or whatever, you know, you
Yeah.
get a little extra because you're white. You got this extra class status or whatever the fuck, you know.
Yeah. I mean that, and that's really what it is, I think, you know. Like, I haven't read it, but I want to get my hands on this book, Death Death by Despair. Um it's written by this lady Ann Case and Angus Deaton. But they're tracking, like, the rise of suicide in the white middle class, you know. And they touch on a few things, but that's like one of those things I find to be fascinating, is that you know, I would imagine, although I've not read the book, that a part of the economic pressure on white families presently is, the fact that the neoliberal project, ate up the wealth of black community, it ate up the wealth of the brown community, and it finally got to the point where, the white middle class started to feel the pressures of, inflation and like the economic collapses, and so it's like, damn, there, I don't know, that's fucked up. I mean, like, you know,
Yeah, when white people start to feel the pinch, some shit's
well, yeah, and
that's
then
when they
like,
gonna start to
That's
get shit done.
that's when things start to change.
Yeah,
well, I mean, but that's one thing. But then it's like two things, I think. And then on the other hand, like if this is happening in the white community, that almost guaranteed means exponentially it's happening worse in other communities, more impoverished communities. So it's like it's one of those good things because it's like not good, but it helps, I think, to illustrate how, like I said, white poverty is made invisible, and white poverty, how that looks amongst the white middle class is in fucking visible, you know. And I think, and one of the things they kind of hint on is that like white folks don't necessarily have the kind of cultural systems as other people by virtue of not being oppressed, right? And so where there's the black church or any number of things, they kind of were saying that like, white families will sit in silence and not talk to their family members or talk to their community about facing financial stresses. And so in some of these cases, this does indeed lead to suicide. And I'm like, God damn, that's some fucked up shit. You know what I mean? Killing yourself out of shame.
poverty. We've been taught to think poverty is a fucking sin in this. You're not allowed to even mention it, even now. And that's the fucking lever that Republican or right wing folks have been using forever. Well, just don't be poor because if you're not, it's like the same thing with. I mean, it's not the same thing as race. This is a thing of look, you're going to be a lower class if you do this, right? If being poor is lower, you know. So
Well, I
I
think you're
mean,
right. Because I mean, that's how I always like to say the Calvinists, right? Like, we can't forget the Calvinist, theology that informs American Protestantism, right? Like, that work is godly, right? I forget the saying, but you know what I mean. Like, you're right, right? That's a part of the American, ethos.
ethos.
It's like, this Protestant Calvinist, you know, work is a sign of, yeah, it's fucked up, man. Like there's a lot of, there's a lot of fucked up, like, I don't know that shit because I'm like not a white person and shit. But then it's like, I kind of pick up on shit. I'm like, man, I was like, y'all living in some weird shit. I'm sorry, but
Well, I
like
mean,
straight up, like that
it's the
Calvinist shit. I'm like,
whole Protestant puritanical work ethic shit. That's why we so Puritan. We can't see boobies, but
mm,
seeing bodies blown apart. That's great. That's fine.
right, right.
So I mean, yeah, that's what a lot of this has to come down to. Has come down to that and the capitalist ethos of do it yourself. You don't depend, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This kind of
Mm.
toxic sludge of like evangelical fucking cultism and fucking capitalism, just laissez-faire, just anarcho-capitalism really is what just no holds barred. It's just wow. This is what where we're at right now, man. This feels like some late stage shit for real. I don't, of course,
Well, I'm sorry, but and like to your point though, as you say that, what it's a mouthful. Immanentizing the eschaton, right? Like accelerationism. Like these are legit fucking things that there are some within the American body politic that hold on to, right? So the evangelical eschatology of like the end of the world, that they're
that
and it
shit's
sounds
crazy, bro.
insane. Well, and it sounds insane to say, that there are
But they
people,
believe it.
yeah, and they are in political positions of power or positions to organize toward that end. And it sounds crazy, and yet we're all old enough to remember who did Bush talk to when he decided he wanted to invade Iraq, right?
Yep. Yep.
That motherfucker said he talked to God, right?
Yep.
That's fucking frightening. I'm like,
And he
that's
was being
terrifying.
kind of nice,
Well,
right? But if we had an actual fire and brimstone, well, we've gotten
Yeah.
close. If you got an actual educated evangelical preacher type, you talking about the
Mm.
Antichrist, man? Jesus,
well,
man.
and to be fair, I mean, when you look at the book and all, God is really fucked up too when it comes to the Mesopotamia area anyway. So I mean, it's kind of par for the course for him saying, "Yeah, go fuck up Iran," you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
These
yeah.
niggas,
Well,
man.
Israel. Oh shit. Okay, if my power goes out, I'm just gonna go ahead and let you know ahead of time. Uh,
Blame
it
it on the cat.
No, it's fixing a storm like a motherfucker. It's like, see, God, started talking about evangelicals. Got, got this motherfucker pissed off. Shit, you know. Oh, see there, man. I'm gonna still talk about your ass. Fuck you, and then I'm gonna be dead tomorrow. I'm gonna die on the way to Atlanta and shit. But anyway, yeah, it's crazy. But they're using it like the whole Israel, what was the Second Temple is built or whatever, and so is on board with that. But then they forget the part where, like, oh, either you'll be converted to Christianity or fucking be murdered. Part they forget that little part, So it is
Yeah,
scary.
man. It is frightening. I think that was my not. I was already kind of into my shit, but I was a little more tolerant. But after that shit with Bush, I was like, this is really that was a scary moment to me. I was like, this motherfucker is playing to his imaginary best friend. Like, nigga, you already know what you're gonna do. Why are you praying? Like, you already know what you're gonna do. You don't need a yes from your
Well,
imaginary sky friend.
it's virtue signaling. I mean, they
True,
love that
there is that.
term, but it's fucking
Yeah.
virtue signaling. He's telling all his followers, "Look, I love Jesus. Vote for me." Fucking idiot. So
It
okay,
worked.
yeah, it did work. Well, and then their buddies in the second go around they had what's his name, Prescott, pretty rigged the votes in Florida or whatever. But that's a whole different
Hmm.
fucking thing. So what do we do if when they're in the next last little section here? What can we do, Cater man? You said that it's not all dark and doom. But you're
Well, I
the
mean, like I said, I think the other part of Afro pessimism, it is about the now and it's about the present. So that and it is about the past, right? So there are active things that are going on within the Black community as well as without the Black community. I think uh, in a lot of ways, what we are talking about is the mental health and sanctity of Blackness therein. And so, one of the things that we can all do is check in on ourselves, and particularly for Black folks, to check in on ourselves, literally on myself, but in our each other, give each other a little bit more peace and understanding and that validation that we are existing in, a collective, fucking, not even like, it's pre, it's post, it's now, uh what's that, PTSD, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's not just post stress, it's pre-stress, right? So he disappeared.
Yeah. Apparently the storms got to him, but we're still live. So keep
Oh,
on.
okay. So it's like it's not just pre or post traumatic. I think it's important that we acknowledge and validate for one another that we are living in that Blackness is itself traumatic. To be assigned Black in the world is an assignment of trauma. And I think it would behoove us that when we look and talk to one another, that we put that forward, that we're greeting and engaging another person we're sharing in the same trauma, and that we got to talk to one another from that place, out of love and out of respect for who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. And I think that's really applicable not just to Black bodies. It's applicable to Black bodies in context to the Black horror that we face. But I think all bodies, can mutually engage in, like, what, being in the world fucking sucks. Let me tread easy with the motherfuckers that I engage because they are in the same world that fucking sucks. But to answer your question, Chris, I just think, it's one of these things where it's not about one of these things where it is about what can blackness do. What can I do? What can other black folks? What can I expect, or what can they expect of me? And like I said, I hope it is in that notion of black love. Like, I mean that shit. Not no cheesy ass way, because some motherfuckers you can't fuck with,
I
but
know. Yeah.
in this broader notion of like, or even within that, it's like blackness is an assignment of death, right? And I mean that. What happens to black babies in this country, what happens to black mothers in this country, what happens to black boys, girls, it is death. The unfortunate reality of black men murdering black trans women, the assignment of black is death. It is trauma. And so, like I said, I can only hope that we own that shit, and we stop trying to fucking avoid the elephant in the room that this place isn't for us, never been for us. We can, yeah, it ain't for us, ain't ever been for us. And as a meager 13% of the population, 49 to 50 million people, we cannot afford to look at anybody else to show us the love that we deserve. We can't afford to wait for anybody else. Like, I have to make sure that when I walk down the street, I'm looking at my black brothers and sisters in a very particular way, because nobody else is going to do that. And so what we can do is, I hope, validate one another, you know, uh, toward resistance, you know, toward the camaraderie that comes with resistance, you know. That's it.
I mean, I don't, obviously, I feel that with the human level. Of course,
Hell
the
yeah.
other,
I think
you
it's,
know,
I think it's a universal thing. I know in context of what we're going through, for sure. But like I said, yeah, that's something I think anybody can fucking walk away from. Like I said, the shit is fucked up, and if we keep looking around like, who gonna fix you? Who, with your fucking ass on your shoulders, and we're not looking to the people around us in a dignified way, really to dignify them and to dignify ourselves, then we're fucking up, because it's the motherfuckers around us, that's who I'm dealing with. So, like I said, I don't wear deodorant. I wear I wear oil. I do some hippie shit.
All natural juices and berries.
Yeah, I do some hippie shit every now
your
and again. So
funky
you
ass. Okay.
I got like I have a very loving heart, and out of that loving heart, yeah, like I said, the only way I can think of the only way shit stops, other than, is that we make it stop, you know. And I don't know what that even means, but I think we all can feel and intuit what that means, right? The world is spinning in a way that it ought not spin. It seems to be ran by psychopathy, right? And um you know I want to think of a different world, like this is the world I live in, yes, for sure, and this is what I'm facing, yes, for sure. But I know there's a different world. It doesn't have to be like this. I know that in my fucking bones, and it's maddening because I know it in my bones even though I don't see it. And I have to think and believe there are other people that feel it the same way I fucking do, right? Like, we all fucking know it, and I don't think, and as a motherfucker that overthinks, I don't think that shit we necessarily have to overthink. We know who has power and what that power looks like. What we don't know is what our power looks like when we act, accordingly, you know, toward shit, inclusion. I mean, like I said, that's like a lot of these words get bandied about, you know, but yes, toward inclusion, like what, you know, the system of power necessarily is about exclusion. Nobody's going to be included into the 1% unless you got 1% fucking money. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
it's like we sometimes engage in notions of exclusion on this horizontal plane. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Exclusion is the right of the rich. I can't afford to exclude motherfuckers. You know what I mean? within reason, of course, right? So it's like,
Right.
yeah, like this. I think toward inclusion. Like, what does that look like? By my principles and by my standards, what's that look like? Knowing that my principles and standards might not be so unique, and I'll find other motherfuckers that's on the same fucking wavelength, smoking jazz
So,
cigarettes and shit.
oh shit.
Mhm.
Okay. So power of the people, basically. Let's say.
Power to the motherfucking people. Hell yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Well, I'm gonna end this before fucking apparently I'm gonna die in a fucking cyclone and shit. So wait, that's the wrong continent. Anyway, um, thanks for coming on, Keeter. It's been really informative, and I appreciate hearing your take on shit.
Thank you
You're
very much, man.
you're like a professor hippie motherfucker. And shit.
He's the cult leader.
Yeah.
This is true. Now, thank you for having me. I know I'm hard to pin down and shit, and this is not the best. This is new for me, so it's a little difficult, uncomfortable, but this was a lot of fun. Y'all made it very comfortable and easy, so thank you.
No worries, man. And John, thanks for coming on again and being the black guy.
Because Keeter obviously wasn't, but
yeah, so I guess I'll go ahead and end it on that note because they were great words. Great words. The best words, I have the best words. So anyway, he's gonna live to be 100, isn't he, this motherfucker?
something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
It's because he doesn't put all that deodorant on like we do and just clog up our pores and all.
Yep. he eat overcooked turkey or overcooked steak and shit. No deodorant. And
That's
well
how I
done
know
steak
there is
with
no
ketchup.
God. Really. God.
Right.
Anyway, all right, well, I'll wrap it up. So everybody, until next time, y'all take it easy now, okay?
Do the same, man. We'll do.
Peace.